got a great session planned for everyone this morning. Maybe we can just get started, and we have a few housekeeping things before we get into the main content of our presentation today or of our council meeting today. My name is Mary Carlson. I'm with Isthmus Engineering, and I'm the chair of the CTS Transportation Planning and Economy Research Council. Welcome to today's webinar. This meeting is sponsored by CTS, by our Research Council. A little background about our councils. We provide a forum for transportation professionals and researchers to exchange information on current transportation issues and trends. We bring together university faculty and staff with practitioners from the public and private sectors to recommend direction and participate in improving the center's research, education, and engagement programs. After I'm done, I will put a link into the chat that shares just a little more information about the research councils if you are interested in learning more about them. This morning, our council vice chair, Lisa Austin, is also here and will help co-facilitate this webinar. Lisa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep, thank you. I'm really excited about this presentation today too. So I'm Lisa Austin with MnDOT in the Center for Community Connections.
All right, everybody. We also would like to share that Gina Boss and Katie are not available today. So our usual cast of characters are not here. We are graciously joined by Dawn Hood. So thank you, Dawn, very much for partnering with us today. Today's webinar will showcase community engagement tools developed by the University of Minnesota's Design Center as part of a project funded by the Transitway Impacts Research Program. The presentation will review the tools and explain how they've been used on the Rethinking I-94 project that's being led by the St. Paul architecture firm Formula. We encourage your participation throughout the webinar, so please let us know if you have a question or a comment, and we can unmute you, or we can read your questions that you put into the chat. Lisa, would you go through some housekeeping?
Yep, absolutely. And can we advance the slide here? Thank you very much. So, oh, there we go. So again, like we said, at the end, we'll have a question and answer session. And go ahead and, if you're not familiar with Zoom, you can see at the bottom there's a Q&A bubble and a chat bubble. It's helpful to have the questions in the Q&A so that we can kind of go through them and check them off as they get answered. So throughout the presentation, feel free to write your questions in there. If you put something in the chat, we'll see it too, but Q&A is a little more helpful. And then, when I'll be moderating the Q&A. So go ahead and we'll raise your hand, and then we'll be able to unmute you. So you can't just unmute yourself. So that's how the Q&A will work at the end. And then we'll also have a round robin. So think about this a little bit as you're watching the presentation. The round robin, we have these council meetings twice a year, and we like to hear about issues that your organization is facing, especially things that might lead to future research projects. So keep that in mind. And when we do the round robin, we look forward to hearing about issues you're having or problems or questions you have that might lend themselves to research projects in the future. You could also get, next slide, please, and we'll go on to the professional credit. So that's another thing that's nice, that CTS has set up ways for people to get these development credits, whether it's for planning or engineering. So if you would like to have information about how to get professional credit, put your email in the chat and to the panelists, and we will send you the information about how to get credits. And then next slide, another really exciting thing that's coming up soon is the annual Transportation Research Conference. Now, usually this is in person, but we'll be doing it virtually again this year, but still a great opportunity to hear some great sessions. The morning session will feature Kyle Sheldon, who's the new director of CTS, so that's a chance to meet him. And the theme for both plenary and keynote speakers is climate change. So in the morning, there'll be a good panel discussion on climate change. And then the lunchtime keynote is from the USDOT, the Assistant Secretary for Climate Policy. So really great CTS Transportation Conference. I think it's only $75, so register and attend. That's a good opportunity coming up. And then lastly, if there's any students joining us today, we do like to know how many students are participating in the CTS transportation meetings. So go ahead and put your name in the chat to the panelists is fine, and we'll track how many students are attending. So with that, I'll pass this back to Mary.
Thanks so much, Lisa. All right, we are ready to introduce our speakers today. I'm so pleased to welcome Tom Fisher, Ebethal Banese, and Lissa Washington. Tom is a professor and director of the Minnesota Design Center in the College of Design at the University of Minnesota. Ebethal is a student in the U of M's Master of Science in Architecture Research Practices program, and Ebethal is partnering with Lissa Washington, who is project manager at Formula, a St. Paul architecture firm that is implementing and using these tools that Tom Fisher's group is developing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom, Ebethal, and Lissa. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Great. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, everybody, for attending. As Mary said, I'm Tom Fisher. I'm a professor in the School of Architecture, although what I focus on my work, my research is in urban design and infrastructure issues. And I direct the Minnesota Design Center, which is a center that's been at the University of Minnesota for over 35 years. We do a lot of transportation-related research. For example, we were part of the recent National Science Foundation autonomous vehicle research program that was a 3-year long project. We looked at the impact of autonomous vehicles on street and road design and on infrastructure in the public realm. We'll be reporting today about the TERP project that we completed earlier this year. We're currently involved in a project in Wabasha, Minnesota, around rural community transit strategies, looking at ways to use digital platforms to reimagine rural transit. And we're just about to start a project up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, looking at mobility hubs related to autonomous vehicle shuttles. So that gives you a sense of some of the research, transportation research that we do at my center. Today, the three of us are going to sort of tag team here, do a relay. So I'm going to spend the first part of this hour just talking about the research that we did for the TERP project. And when I was dean of the college for 19 years, one of the things we set up was a new program called the MSRP, the Masters of Science and Research Practices, which was an effort to get fabulous students like Ebethal working in terrific firms like Formula to work on research that was of mutual interest to both faculty as well as to the firms. And so we were so fortunate to be able now to partner with Formula, and Lissa Washington's here from Formula, as well as to work with great students like Ebethal on taking the research that we did into practice. And so after I talk about our research, then you're going to hear from Ebethal and Lissa about how they're actually applying these tools and refining them. And so we're quite excited, and we see this as a 3-year follow-up to our research, and we're very much looking forward to what they discovered. So just a little bit about this particular research project before I share my screen and show you some of the images from our work. This project actually had 2 parts. So we worked with CTS's Accessibility Observatory, and Andrew Owen and Kristen Carlson at the observatory. They looked at several BRT routes. So we looked at the Rush line, the Gold line, and they looked at the B and E line, looking at the impact of BRT on particularly transit-dependent communities. So there was a strong focus on equity in this research, as well as accessibility. So we looked at access to destinations that aren't typically studied in transportation planning. For example, access to churches, access to groceries, access to public libraries, access to parks, access to schools. And so the first part of their research, which I highly recommend you look at, really showed how the strategic planning of stops and the alignment of these lines can really make an enormous difference in access to these other kinds of destinations that aren't necessarily work-related destinations that can transform the ability of underserved populations in our region in terms of their accessibility. So they did that study, and then what we did is we were really trying to develop what we called a mixed methods toolkit. And so our idea was that we would develop a series of tools that the broader public could access and that transportation planners could use in improving the communication and the feedback of the general public. And when we started this research, when we first made the proposal, it was pre-COVID. But when we got the research funding, it pretty much aligned with the arrival of the pandemic. And so what we had planned is a series of in-person community engagement efforts. And of course, with the pandemic, we couldn't do that. And so I will talk about how we really switched gears and we moved to a completely online approach to community engagement, and then talk about some of the tools that we've developed. So let me share my screen, and I thought I would just run through the research report and just show you the 6 or 7 tools, parts of it that we developed, and then I'll turn it over to Lissa and Ebtehal. So we developed this kind of icon. My colleague, Joseph Hang, who actually once worked at Formula before coming to my center and at the university, developed this to really sort of capture the idea that these tools were all related. And so we've developed tools that were available for mapping existing situations, for helping people understand the context within which transportation is occurring, giving people tools to evaluate existing situations, as well as tools to engage them. And so if you can see, we've developed a series of flashcards. We developed a way to map station areas, both in terms of their actual physical conditions, as well as the experience of ordinary people in these places. A strategy for evaluating stops in terms of access and availability. And then we also showed how there could be some 3D visualization tools that could help the public understand the situations that they're facing. So one of the ideas of this, and we had these sort of 3 phases. So we worked in Hennepin, Ramsey, and Washington counties. We focused our work on 3 lines: the B line that went through Ramsey and Hennepin, the Rush line that went through Ramsey County, and the Gold line that went through Ramsey into Washington County. When we had to switch gears to move to the online world, we decided that we would look at digital platforms that can be used in community engagement. And I'll show you what we did in that regard. We actually evaluated pretty intensely 54 different digital platforms. And we actually tested some of these with users to get a sense of which ones were most user-friendly. We also evaluated who might be most interested in using these tools. And then this 3rd phase, where we actually developed the range of other tools that I will talk about. And one of the things that we did is, so within those 4 areas of contextualizing, mapping, engaging, evaluating, you'll see the different tools and the roles that they played. So again, I'll run through this right now. But one of the things that we did is we also sort of thought of these as like the kind of tools you'd buy at a hardware store. So with each tool, we actually have a kind of explanation of how to use it, who should use it, what it is, where it might be used, when it should be used, why to use it, and how. So the notion was sort of like what you might find if you bought a drill at the hardware store. There would come some information about how to use it, when to use it, and what have you. And so we tried to make this these set of tools as simple as possible to use, and to sort of show that they can be used in different ways for different purposes. So actually one of the first things we did, and here I'll just stop here, is I'm going to just show you the Excel spreadsheet that we developed as our evaluation of the 54 digital platforms. And so as you can see here, and this is all available as part of our research if you're interested. So here are the tools on the left. And we arrived at these by actually doing some surveys of both tools that people are frequently using, obviously things like Facebook and other tools like that, Slack, as well as tools that we discovered are not well known. We included links to all of them so that planners can access them, download them. We focused only on tools that were free to residents. So again, accessibility was really important. So we didn't look for any tool that required the user to have to pay for it. So we also looked at those, some that are free to the enterprise. Many of them do require an account on the part of the, say, the city, county, state using this tool. We looked at multilingual platforms, and we listed the languages that some of these platforms are available in. And so we thought that was increasingly important in our very diverse set of communities here. We looked at tools that allow for public comment. We look at tools that allow for idea generation. So this notion that it isn't just a one-way communication, but that it allows for interaction and others to sort of propose their own ideas. We looked at tools that are mobile friendly, mobile phone friendly, knowing that for many people, the smartphone may be their only digital device. They may not actually have computers at home or internet access, but we did find that many people do have access to smartphones. We also found, by the way, as we explored these tools, that there is a generational gap. We found that younger people, as well as people who might have children at home, were more likely to want to engage digitally, remotely, as opposed to a somewhat older population that might be, less comfortable using digital tools and more comfortable meeting in person. And so we never thought that these tools would be in place of in-person meetings, but that they could be a complement to more traditional community engagement for those who, for example, don't have childcare at home and need to be home, or those who are working two jobs and really can't get to an evening meeting, but can communicate through, say, a digital device. We looked at tools that allow for stakeholder engagement, surveys, tools that allow for video streaming, photo narratives. And we also looked at, in terms of tools that allow for financial and data management. So this idea of being transparent about the economic implications of various transportation decisions. So some tools that allow real-time reporting, scenario analysis, indicator tracking, and what have you, data management. And then we sort of summarize them according to the number of features that each one provides. And then, as you'll see along the bottom here, you can do any of these columns. So you can, look at, which ones are multilingual, and it will bring up those that are multilingual. So depending on what your criteria is, you can assess which of these tools meets your needs. We discovered that, in fact, there's probably several different platforms that any project might involve and include, depending on what the information is that you're trying to find. So that was sort of a first part of our research right as the pandemic arrived. We felt we needed to do that work in order for us to continue to develop the other tools. And so we use these digital platforms as the basis for what follows. So one of the things that we found as we engaged with different communities is how big a gap there is between the words that we use in transportation planning and what the public understands. And so one of the first things we decided to develop was a set of flashcards, which basically were very simple tools that would enable a community to see what we're talking about when we use certain words. And so we divided them into two categories. We had transit-related cards and then more context-related cards. we also, again, had the, you know, who would use these, what they are, where you would use them, when you would use them, why and how. We felt that the flashcards were very important to use early on in a transportation planning process so that everybody was sort of on the same page in terms of what different terms meant and what things looked like. Also, and so here's what, so we also developed a set of icons, and this will be more important as I show some of the other tools, because we developed these as both as digital stickies as well as they could be physical stickies for in-person engagement, where it enables people to quickly sort of identify some feature that they like or maybe don't like about a project. So, and this gives you a sense of these cards. So they were designed to be, if they were in print, front and back. So we have the definitions in bold that we show an image here. And as you can see, we actually then number in the image what some of these bolded words are. So, you know, what is a curb cut? What's a sidewalk width? What's a signaled intersection? You know, what's a well-drained sidewalk look like? What's a bike lane look like? The other thing we did is we actually tried to pick images that showed best practices. So part of this was also to help communities know what they should expect in their public realm. And you know what a good bike lane looks like, and how to treat it in a way so that people feel safe. What a good crosswalk looks like. What different zones on the sidewalk look like, different kinds of streets. This was an area that we found there was a lot of confusion in the public about what's an arterial street versus a collector, you know, a shared street. So we, again, tried to show these different types of bicycle lanes and treatments of bicycle lanes, different kinds of bike parking, different forms of transit. Obviously, again, there was not a lot of clarity about what's the difference between light rail and, say, a trolley. And then features of a transit stop. What can people and what should people expect in a well-designed transit stop? And then we looked at these larger contextual issues. What is street furniture? People, we found, didn't even know what street furniture was. And so we wanted to show the various elements on the street. What does good street lighting look like? How do you prevent glare? How do you make sure that the entire walk space and area is properly illuminated? Street plantings, car park, different kinds of parking, different ways to think about the right-of-way. This was another area that people often didn't understand what we meant when we were talking about rights-of-way, different kinds of green spaces, transit-oriented development. That was another term that most people didn't know. So again, we thought we should show it. And density, land use, zoning, these are all aspects that we looked at. And so from that, we decided that one of the things we would do is along these three lines, the rush line, the gold line, and the B line, was to start doing some station area mapping. And this was to complement the work that Andrew and Kristen were doing, but they were working at a very large scale. We decided to go down into a very close-in scale to particular stops, and to sort of think about how a station area mapping tool might be used by whom, when it would be used, where, how, and why. And so let me just show you what we did. So here are the three lines that we looked at with all of the station areas identified with those circles. And then we, in this case, here's an example of the Bruce Vento Trail, Arpenter Avenue stop planned for the BRT line, the rush line. And so we showed, again, in a given radius, land use. We then looked at other transportation connections, like bus lines. We also looked at pedestrian and multimodal connections. So bike network, sidewalks, we mapped the sidewalks, or in this case, the lack of sidewalks by this stop. And part of this, by the way, was to also connect public works plans in municipalities with these lines, so that as we start putting in these lines and these stops, we recognize that some of these stops need sidewalk improvements. They need changes to the roadways. around the stop. It isn't just the stop itself, but access is about how you get from the stop to and from the stop to other destinations. Then we took some, again, we were working with the community, like what are the places that you would want to go to from this stop? What we found in this case is that there were 2 community churches and then Lake Phelan. And so we looked at, okay, what's the experience of getting off that stop and going to those 3 destinations? And so we worked with community members who were using these stickies to sort of identify what was there and what was lacking. So in the case of this stop, it was really immediately striking that people who are in this area say there's no sidewalks. And so you will get off the stop and you're basically walking along the road. Now, granted, it's a wide road, but it's not a particularly safe one because it's Larpenteur Avenue, so it's fairly fast traffic. And so again, you can start to see the idea here is that we used Google Map images, Street View images that enable people to just identify what their concerns are. And so this would be used by transportation planners to assess what do people care about, where do they want to go, and what are their concerns in terms of access. And so we did this for several stops. We did this along the Gold Line and landfall, and where we looked at the proposed stop. Again, the lack of sidewalks to that stop, as you can see, there are essentially almost no sidewalks to that particular stop. And looked at possible destinations of people. And again, we worked with people to sort of identify, they're sometimes very extremely narrow. They're not really sidewalks. They're sort of the edge of the road in a different pavement material. And then looked at what the conditions are at the stop itself. And again, also the speed of traffic and other lighting or lack of lighting in this case to different destinations. And we did the same along the B line where we again looked at other transportation connections, sidewalk connections, destinations, and the experience of those destinations. And of course, in a more urban area, there were many more features, curb cuts, street lighting, and what have you, that made the access to and from the stop easier for people. So we also, wanted to develop a tool that would enable people to recount their experiences. And so we developed and we were using this in our own work and other research as well as in our own teaching. We used Miro board as a way for people to also begin to post their thoughts. And so here are some examples of some explorations we did with communities in terms of their ability to look at along in this case the B line, things that they noted. And so the idea here is that communities often see things that sometimes we don't see as transportation planners. And so this ability for people to actually note right on the screen their concerns and to do this in an interactive way was again part of our goal. We also, one reason we developed these stickers is that sometimes people are using different languages or they're, so we wanted to create a visual way for people to express their concerns if there are diversity of languages being used, and this ability to simply point to what they're concerned about. And so again, these are some examples of some of what came out of our community engagement work, which we thought was also evidence that these tools can be accessible to people. As well, we developed a stationary evaluation tool, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And we developed a set of criteria in terms of different categories like pedestrian accessibility. And what does good pedestrian access look like? What does adequate access look like? And what does poor access look like? And so again, the idea here would be that you could use this in a community engagement meeting to help people evaluate a proposed stop. And then finally, we developed these kind of visualization tools. So the idea here would be to take an existing condition and then in real time be able to show the public what it might look like in the future, and where you could add and take away things. So people could say, well, I think it needs more lighting, or this crosswalk is too wide. You can manipulate these tools real time. So again, these are planned stops along these 3 lines. And we looked at, what, different multimodal connections might look like: bike lanes, crosswalks, street lighting, and also in some of the more urban areas, what denser development might look like. So why don't I stop here, and with that, turn it over to Ebtehal and Alyssa to talk about what they've been doing with these tools. And I think you'll see there's some really exciting refinements that they've already come up with. So Alyssa and Ebtehal, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom, for this very detailed and well-explained exploration of the tools. I will start by sharing some slides with the recent work we've been doing, and then Lisa will talk about like higher level, the impact of the research in practice in general. So as we were explaining at the beginning, this project that I'm going to be presenting is like a partnership between Formula and my advisors. There are Nathan and Lisa, and the MDC Center with Tom and Joseph, which he talked about, and his contribution to the TERP research. And we are also supported by faculty. So we have 2 academic advisors, Malini Srivastava and Elise Harrington, who are experienced in also community engagement projects and are continuously providing feedback throughout this process. So as Tom already explained, we start our testing of these tools that he presented and how each of them falls within the engagement process, whether that's contextualizing, mapping, engaging, or evaluating. And we do that through 2 projects. So I'm going to be talking about the Rethinking I-94 project and the Riverview Model Streetcar. And some of you might be familiar with that, and that can be new information to some of you. So I'm going to be giving a brief introduction to each of these projects when I talk about them, and then talking about the existing tools that Tom has already explained, and then the iterations that we go through in an attempt to test these tools in ongoing events and ongoing engagement opportunities, and see how these are being accepted or engaged with by the community, and refining that accordingly. So to start with the Rethinking I-94 project, which is focused on the segment between downtown St. Paul and downtown Minneapolis, we focus on the transit and urban design flashcards, and we are doing some iterative development and analyzing the feedback we're getting from these. So the Rethinking I-94, of course, you are familiar with how the construction of the I-94 in the 1960s destroyed homes and disconnected neighborhoods and led to a pattern of community distrust between the Minnesota Highway Department, which is now MnDOT. So MnDOT started rethinking the highway in 2016 to develop a new vision with the community so that we collectively are doing better. So we intend to reconnect neighborhoods and revitalize communities and ensure that residents have a meaningful voice in the transportation decisions that affect their lives. So as Tom has explained, there are these very informative flashcards that can introduce the public to the language that are being used in urban design or in transit in general, with these informative icons. And we were thinking to create a version of this that is project specific, to start to inform people and the community about Rethinking I-94 and what they need to know in order to engage with us. So we started developing the first version of that, and we took that to the Chromazone Mural and Art Festival back in July. And what we did is that there is a published document now that is focusing on an evaluation metrics with different categories and evaluation criteria and measurements that is like a common understanding between the community engagement facilitators and the community, so that in any future decisions, we use this evaluation criteria and measurement to reach the best alternatives. So what we did is that we designed a front and back of the flashcards with the different categories, with also icons and a QR code that would take us to the project website for people to learn more about it if they like. And in the back of the cards, each of these different categories is then explained in more details through the evaluation criteria and the measurement metrics along with that icon. So we have different versions of the back of the cards for all these different categories. And all of this falls through this one card of like a conversation starter that has the livability framework that was developed along with the community. So people would talk about where they think these different categories fit within the framework of sense of place, equity, economics, connection, and then health and environment. The feedback we got from that is that people were interested and engaged while talking about the categories and the livability framework, but maybe the back of the card was perceived as a little bit too much details, or they weren't that interested to talk about in a pop-up event. So we started thinking that this attempt is mainly attempting to engage with the people, but maybe we can take that further and create some iterations. And we took that to a few other events. I'm pinning down here 2 of them. The Black Business is Beautiful in August, and then the Prospect Park National Night Out. And in that version, we took the tools from the engaging phase to like evaluation and mapping. So the livability framework now became an interactive board that people would have these categories as stickers, and they will put it on the board where they think it fits best, and that is the way to facilitate that conversation. And then they also allocate where they live within the different neighborhoods along the project area, and they would fill out sort of a postcard 2-min doc talking about what is the unique assets of their neighborhood, how they interact with the highway, and what they want to see as changes in the highway. And that is mainly a way to collect and gather that feedback and synthesize it so that it can inform the decisions later on. That was more successful than the first iteration, but we thought that there is still room for development because it would be beneficial to actually reach a common understanding and a common definition of the different categories and the framework. So in future events, we are planning to have another version of the flashcards where we include like the definitions of the metrics. So people would actually describe what they mean when they talk about safety or mobility, or what they get when we talk about this, and connections and equity. And it's a way to bridge any communication gap that's happening. And it's taking the tool to the contextualizing phase, like in the first iteration where we are still trying to fill in the communication gap between the facilitators and the communities. So that was about the flashcards. I will then move to talk about the second project, the Riverview Model Streetcar. And in that project, we are focused on another tool, which is the experiential mapping tool. And the community and the communication and community engagement team was already developing a very similar tool. So our role will come in monitoring the feedback we are getting from it and giving future recommendations. So the Riverview Model Streetcar project is a 12-mile transportation connection between different neighborhoods and anchor destinations and employers in downtown St. Paul, Minneapolis, all the way to the airport area and the Mall of America. And this line is planned to run generally along State Highway 5, West 7th Street, and will provide a higher capacity with frequent service in an area with growing population and employment. So I will give a brief introduction about like the structure of the project so far and the timeline. So we are already past the phase where we identified the locally preferred alternative, which was a 3-year long phase. We are now in the engineering and pre-environmental phase, which is also 3 years long. And after that, we move to project development, final engineering, and construction. The decision tree or the different stakeholders. There are different consultants, so engineering and pre-environmental consultant, cultural resources, station area planning and project management consultant, and Formula's team is part of the communication and community engagement team, and it is consisting of Formula, Bolton and Mink, Nika Creative, and the artist cohort. And of course, the corridor has a set of stakeholders that include the tribes, government entities, neighborhood and community, businesses, real estate, and development. And within the general timeline of the project, right now we are in the fall and winter phase, where we are pinpointing the preferred alternative and studying the central segment plans. So the tool we are talking about, Tom already presented that, the experiential mapping tool, where there is one version as an aerial view or another version as a street view. And in our case, Bolton and Mink was developing Input ID, and I can actually take you to the live website now. When you go to Input ID, you start by having this brief introduction about like the goal of this tool and the project. And what happens, excuse me, this first map is focusing on the project area, and everyone has the opportunity to come in and start to pin down likes, dislikes, concerns, ideas and opportunities, or other comments along the project area. And you have the chance to see what other people are doing or are saying and expressing themselves, and to reply to them as well. That's an example of a concern that someone added. That's an example of an idea that someone added, and so on. And we have another version of this map that is focusing on the significant historical areas within the corridor. So that's a pretty dense area where people started coming down and pinpointing important locations for them, like different buildings, a hotel, a school, and so on. And when you zoom out, you zoom out and you can see these different pins, and you can also add comments or identify historic places as you go. And as a team, we are going in periodically, gathering these comments that we will be receiving from the people, and then we are going to be refining the tool or adding and removing options depending on the feedback we are getting from that. So that was already published, I would say like 3 weeks ago or a month ago. So that's starting to populate now. And then the different tools can be plugged in later on as the timeline of the project is progressing. But so far, these are the 2 tools we've been working on for these 2 projects. And I will stop sharing and hand it over to Lisa to talk about higher learning.
Thank you, Abdul. I just wanted to start by saying that it's fascinating and validating as a practitioner that I don't want to say fell into this, but more or less fell into this out of the need, particularly at the project scale. Quite often, Formula, we work with organizations and groups that are doing one building and this is their one chance and really wanting to get it right. And so knowing that we can take kind of that gut instinct and tools and things that we were using and see that they are supported by research that Tom and Ebtihal have been doing, again, is validating to everything, the mission of our firm and of our profession, and then stretching it and being able to utilize it and leverage it to work on transit and transportation projects. You know, we did work on the Green Line, and that was a little bit before my time, but there was a lot of this information, this type of stuff happening, and again, just seeing that it's come around full circle and that it's continued to be applied and used and is great. I don't have a PowerPoint to share because I let these 2 do it all. But every time I have a conversation with Ebtihal, I'm just deeper and more deeply fascinated by just this whole segment and again, like I said, just those gut things that we do, seeing that there's this support and there's ways to even enhance it. We were having a great conversation, the group before kind of setting up this particular meeting. And, you know, I think I started talking a little bit about things that we do within our organization and with our project partners. And I know some of them are on here, and I know some of our clients are on here as well. But we also like to use and express the importance of centering things around youth. I think, Mary, I think you were mentioning kinetic energy. And so the idea of like, it's trickling in my mind on how to get that, like get that kind of thing going. But we always try to center around art and youth as a base. There's no wrong answer in art, and art's subjective. And I think, you know, I think Tom was, you know, he was touching on language and using icons and things like that for language, but art is another way of expressing, and not just, you know, having an arts team just to draw pretty pictures or to, you know, create art that's kind of adjacent to the project, but it actually informing the project and the process. You know, and then I think the idea of continuing to center back around on youth, particularly in transportation, is that these projects take a long time. And by the time most of us, these things come to fruition, most of us are not necessarily going to be the ones that are going to ride it with frequency. And so the idea is to get people involved for the long haul and make sure that they understand that there is a bigger, longer picture. And as our population gets older, and as the youth come along, they're going to be the ones that have taken on these I don't want to say new ways, but have adopted you know, transit as a you know, as an not as an option, but as a lifestyle, and continue to use it, use different modes of transportation much more fluidly than I think a lot of us are going to. And I think Tom's work on the autonomous vehicles, I think that's going to be, you know, as that continues to develop, and I'm hearing it in different directions, it's going to be amazing. Had a couple other notes, and actually I know we're getting into questions soon here, but I wanted to just kind of set a couple questions or a couple of thoughts that I've been having as this conversation's been happening, as you know, doing engagement in this, I don't say even new because it's not new anymore, but in this virtual environment, trying to figure out as we tiptoed kind of back into in-person engagement a little bit, but now we're kind of drawing back again because of season and because we don't know really what's happening. But I wanted to ask a couple of questions, and I would love to hear everybody, you know, and hear how it responds, panel and beyond. But you know, as Tom, you mentioned something about being able to take and adapt these tools, which we did, but taking them and adapting them in a way that that works for an organization, a group, or a project. Is there a certain point that you think that it loses its original intent? You know, we've adapted the tools and stretched the tools, and then we've seen those tools taken and then further kind of, I don't say refined, or I don't know, I'm not gonna, it's not bad or good, but just that it's stretched, and I don't know if some of it, the original idea has been lost. But is there a point in which it's no longer from that original thought or intent? Was a question that I had.
Yeah,
you know.
Alyssa, if I can just respond. I mean, I think it's great what Formula and Ebtahal are doing. You know, I see these tools as you know, iterating and being refined. And we went into this knowing that maybe some of these tools just don't work. like, maybe, we tried it and it just isn't very successful when it's actually applied. So what's so exciting to us is to see how you're applying them and how you're modifying them. Every great tool, be it a hammer or a screwdriver or whatever tools we use, I mean, they've evolved over a long period of time of use. And so maybe somebody, maybe the original hammer was just a rock, and now we have hammers because people realize there is a better design. And so I really think ideally that all of our research would go through this application phase and refinement phase that you're doing. And so we just see your work as really just an extension of our research. And we're happy to say that some of these things were just failures, or some of them maybe had a core of a good idea, but you've clearly already taken some of those ideas much further. So thank you for your work.
I mean, thank you for yours. And like I said, Ebtahal keeps bringing stuff to my attention that just is fascinating. And then I got to go back and look at them and think about them. And then, as I'm trying, as an idea comes, I'm like, I know I've seen this somewhere. I know I've seen some part of it or some aspect of it. Where was that? So before she walks away for the end of her time with us, I'm going to have to make sure I have the download on exactly where the stuff is. I was listening and thinking about as you were talking, and you mentioned something about we talked about having to quickly adapt to online. And so again, now we've been in this mode for a while, and we're talking about kind of doing a both and. Where do you see, I guess I don't have a fully formed question, but I think we're all still trying to figure out a way to do these things effectively, and trying to figure out how to, is it asynchronous? Is it, how do we do the both and situation? And I know technology is one aspect of it, not that technology is a problem, but that the venues in which sometimes we have limited access, or you're really bringing in the whole camera crew and trying to figure that out. I guess,
I think we're going to all be in hybrid situations going forward. It's great that you're both able to now do these in-person community engagement efforts, which we couldn't do at the height of the pandemic. But I still think that there are parts of our communities who are more comfortable doing things remotely. And even after the pandemic, for personal reasons, we found families with kids, they can't go to an evening meeting. They don't have childcare, but they do have a smartphone. And we're seeing this in city council meetings. City councils are saying that the participation is way up from what it used to be. So I think this hybrid of digital and in person is going to be the future of community engagement.
I agree. I definitely think so. Just anecdotally, I do, we've had several meetings on yet another project. And I do recall, and making note of just the average age, and, that there were really, really small ears listening along, so I think that's a great way to kind of bring people into the fold, and I think maybe we need to encourage, just society-wide, we need to encourage people to, I know, Mary, I'm going to shut up in a minute, I promise. But we need to encourage, I think we need to encourage people of all ages to participate and to allow children to be present. I'm one of those people that drags my child around to all sorts of things pre-pandemic, and luckily I have a situation where he's a good child. But we need to encourage that and not necessarily offer this side room for childcare, but maybe we can offer tools that are right there, and maybe we offer a structure and a format in a space, and it's not just us talking to a screen and we're all sitting in rows of chairs and eating cookies. We need to it needs to become, something that's a little bit more interactive in maybe multiple ways. And maybe it's sometimes there's information that needs to be presented, but sometimes maybe it needs to be more tactile for everyone involved. So that's my
Melissa, if I can jump in, I love this question, and we have a question from one of our audience members that relates to this as well. And she's asking, as we look at what we've learned over the past 18 months, and are thinking about this maintaining a hybrid environment going forward, she's wondering if we're losing part of the community building that happens. And so that happens through in-person engagement. So I'm really curious what the panel thinks about that question of, if we're doing hybrid, are we unintentionally, well, what are we doing to community building? I don't even want to put a judgment on it. So I'm just curious. And huge thank you to Angie Stenson for asking that question what does the panel think?
I guess I'll start and I'll let Tom jump in, or Ebtihal jump in. I think that by Don, I think that I think maybe there's meeting with more intentionality. And I think that's why we talk about pop-up events, and we talk about engaging people. We all say engaging people where they're at. And so there are still neighborhood organizations that are doing things. There's National Night Out. So there are ways for people to gather. And I think providing a way to give information, not be the center stage of the show, but be able to provide information that's relevant to a community at events that are already happening, instead of creating the event. So I think that in some ways I understand, and I agree that it feels a little bit like you're losing community, but again, I think something that Tom said, we quite often find people that don't engage because their kids aren't, they have kids at home and they have to, it's not a good time. But I think there are other ways. I was just talking to somebody from Metro Transit, actually a panel that we're talking later on this week, and she mentioned really sticking to, because we're all Zoom exhausted too, sticking to a shorter format, promising to stay to it, and then and then doing them at different hours. So we've tried that before too.
Mary, it's an interesting question, and thank you, Alyssa, for that response. One of the reasons we wanted to develop this toolkit was to move past the way in which community engagement has unfortunately often been done in the past in transportation planning, which is that you come up with a couple options and then you have your community meeting, you show a couple of the options and you sort of say, which one do you like? I mean, that to us is not about community engagement. That's about checking off a box. Okay, we talk to the community. And as I think we all know, sometimes those options are just variations of the same option. And so we felt that we wanted to flip that whole process to really say, way before you get to thinking about the actual transportation design and plan, that you're engaged with these flashcards. You're talking about, as Lissa and Ebtihal are doing, the meaning of terms. I mean, what does mobility mean to you? What does accessibility or equity mean? And really getting a lot of feedback about these places, so that when it really gets to coming up with the plan, there's been all of this community building out ahead of time, rather than a box that gets checked further down the process. So anyway, we think that any of these tools, whether digital or in person, all of them build community much better than what has happened in the past.
And I want to say, and I don't know if there was another question, or I kind of saw some things popping up and popping down, but I think something else that I was thinking about as Tom was speaking was, I kind of touched really quickly on our artists and engaging artists. I think it's a way to kind of support the community, if you can bring in local artists to work with. Also, I think, and I'm leaning more and more on them as being the true bell ringers. even if they're not of that specific community, they might not live off of West 7th, for example, on, for Riverview. But we have an artist team, and they regularly check us and say, I don't get what that is. What am I engaging around? Who am I, if I'm taking this to someone, what does this actually mean? And I think that the work that Tom has done and set the groundwork for is that really that's the greatest part about it, is it really bridges that, because we're all human, but we all get, into our technical expertise sometimes and forget that, your common layperson might not understand that. Or as James, who at Formula says, he's like, I have to make sure my 70-year-old grandmother can understand what I'm talking about, because if she doesn't understand what I'm talking about, whether it's building or transportation project or, whatever, if she doesn't understand it, then how am I explaining this to anybody else? So, and I think about that in terms of, from 7 to 70, we've got to really think about that. And I think the tools that Tom has started, and then I think the work that Ebtihal has done and to try to further develop them and have them apply for rethinking, is really a start. And we're continuing to kind of figure that out as we work through both projects and other community engagement projects.
Well, thank you for the great presentation. This is fantastic. I'll continue. We've started getting into Q&A, so I'll go ahead and continue facilitating. Lisa, don't worry about trying to track the questions. I will sort those and ask them. So I'll be tracking on some of those. I'll just say one reason I was very excited. Well, there's lots of reasons I'm excited about this presentation, but how rarely do you get a chance to hear a presentation on research and then actually have practitioners talk about how they're using it in the field? And, that's the gold standard. We want to make sure that, I'm with MnDOT, any of the research that we're funding or any of the research that the university is doing is really applicable to practitioners. So this is really a window of opportunity to look at what the ivory tower put together and then how it actually works, on the street. So already the conversation has led to some of that. One of the questions that was already answered by Tom from Joe Scala was talking a little bit about the flashcards and the stickies and some of the aha moments. And I just want to build on, Tom, you answered that, some of the aha moments were people not understanding like the transportation jargon, which, I think we all get that. I'm curious about the icons that, you chose in the research, and then Ebtihal that you revised for the Riverview and the I-94 project. Is there, especially if these are sort of open source and anyone can use these tools, it's like you'd like to see like there be some standard icons that, it can be used in urban and rural areas or anywhere around the country, kind of like we all know what the bathroom signal looks like or the walking person looks like, some of these other things like your sidewalk icon or your bike parking icon. Did you start with some standard things and how are we going to refining those so that they can be sort of universally understood and the population gets more educated on these things? So either one of you can answer, Tom or Ebtihal.
Well, I'd love to hear Ebtihal's thinking, because you've clearly expanded and refined the icons. How did you do that, and what was some of your thinking?
It's really related to what Lisa was just talking about before that question. I think I like the priority in that was to make it as accessible as possible to the largest amount, like groups of people that might come and engage with us. So having something that maybe can be understood without actually having to stop at a board and at a table to read a long text. You want to like attract people to come and engage with you, and you want to make it like easy and I think as flexible as possible. And Lisa was also a part of the development of these flashcards, and I think our priority in that was bringing in people, drawing them, because at some events we don't even have the option to go and approach people. They are the ones that have to come to the table, and to make it as simple and accessible as possible.
I like your idea, Lisa, that maybe there's an international language of icons that we should look into. So that's a good next step.
Yeah, no good research project ends without a next research project. So there you go. You got your next, you can bring that up in the round robin, international symbols for transportation jargon. So good, thanks for that discussion. The next question is related to one that Mary Morse Marty put in the Q&A about how the agencies are using some of the information that you've gathered. So Tom, whether it's from the TERP research for the B line and the Rush line, or Abdihal with Riverview or Rethink, do you have a sense for how the agencies that you were doing this research for will use the information that you gathered about what the public's interested in?
Maybe Lissa and Ebdihal are more able to answer that than I can. I mean, I hope agencies are using these, but we don't know. And I think as they get refined, they'll be more likely to be used. But Ebdihal or Lissa, what are your sense of that?
I think right now we're a little bit, because transportation projects are so long, I feel like we're a little bit early in seeing how the whole thing is cycling around. I think, and I know Hyla Mays is on the phone or on the call from Bolton and Mink, and we've utilized Input ID with them on several projects. And I think speaking to gathering input and getting people to speak their minds, it's a great tool for doing that. So I think any experiential mapping, anything that can really grab people to allow them to express themselves is beneficial. I think I will say, and I'm going to drag in a whole other project. I think early on we worked with Hennepin County, Bolton and Mink, and Formula before Ebdihal, and we did a project in North Minneapolis on. It was CASA 152. And, I think we went into the interview and they said, I had to learn the language, to be honest. And for, and that was just enough there. And as soon as I said it, they were like, we don't want to hear that term anymore. So we immediately went about renaming the project so that it was something that was accessible. It told its location, it told what it told quickly, and, what it was. And so I think that, as we go through and Rethinking I-94 was, the name was there already. But I think finding ways to touch and grab onto people in a very real way, which I think that's why, I know that's why we started with the postcards and the, with the neighborhoods, so that people can identify and center themselves into the place. I know I went way off and I don't even know if I answered that question, but I'll let Ebdihal, maybe she's more focused and she can bring it back around.
That's great. But yeah, I also wanted to add that after each of these in-person engagements, the team already prepares a report, they report back everything they heard and the tools that we included in that event. And what I think is very interesting is that in the academic world, that's what we call qualitative analysis. They come up with the common themes and common codes and gather this feedback in a structured way, so that in the following event, even that you saw in the presentation, some of them are a few days apart. That as a facilitator, you would try to adapt and change what's needed as quickly and organically as possible, so that it's better and better in each opportunity. But I can also say that I think we concluded that different types of events and different types of participants would prefer different things and would focus on simply the nature of people who are in a sports event would be interested to talk about, for example, cycling or pedestrian movement in a project, and maybe in a farmer's market or something, that another thing can be a priority. So I think there is a big role on the facilitator or the person who is on site to adapt and be flexible, and maybe to also adapt the tool itself as needed on the spot. And yeah, from a group, make it different and make it adaptable from a person to person, or from a group to a different group, or from an event to another event.
And Ebdihal just actually made me think of that, just in sparking that, because you saw, particularly with Rethinking I-94, we were suddenly engaging in a short period of time. And I want to say even the adaptation between the chromosome event and the cards and the postcards, that they kind of went away, but we use that livability framework, the 5 things, and then we just let it be a little bit more open and free flowing, as far as like, okay, well, we'll just hand, you have thoughts, tell us what do you think about these things, and and what's working and what's not working, and handed them, this, as opposed to taking stickers and identifying where they thought things qualified and where they thought that things belonged within the livability framework. So she's absolutely 100% right on that. You're muted, Lisa.
Thank you. Sorry about that. My lips are flapping, but a couple of questions we have in the Q&A area on back to some of this engaging artists. I think that's people have been doing it for a while, but there's not a lot of data to show how successful that is. I will just make a plug right now. There is a problem statement in the MnDOT RFP. Hopefully it'll get funded. It's still part of the competitive process, but to look at how artists and creative folks can impact transportation planning and projects. So we hopefully will learn more about that in a research setting in the future. But for now, a couple of the questions are kind of expanding that artists to other groups that might be able to help with some of that creative outreach. So are there other kind of groups that you've thought of or have worked on that can help with creative engagement, landscape architects, or even just other citizen groups that are non-traditional? So any of you can answer that if you got thoughts or ideas or experiences with other creative processes.
I'll start, and I will say another frequent collaborator of ours is juxtaposition arts. So it's the intersection of art and youth. And I actually recently spoke to someone that has went through juxtaposition arts program. The group of they were not called students; they're called apprentices. So they learn the value of art in the world and society, and how it impacts society, and how art can be a living, and how it can be threaded into any aspect of life. So they have a tactical urbanism studio, and they're fearless, and they go out and are able to craft and curate and study a problem. And I think it is the true and freeing in some ways, true collaboration of research and putting research into practice. So that is a group. Like I said, we try to engage youth whenever possible, and not just to take juxtaposition arts and drop them in the middle of St. Paul, for example. Like that's not their area of expertise, but try to find other organizations and build upon them, and the encouragement of artists and artist type folk is to build community capacity. So and as we were all talking and looking at everything, I was things were kind of trickling my mind, and I know that we set up community advisory committees for these projects, and technical advisory committees, and and the community and the station area planning teams, those are largely people from the community. And maybe it's time to figure out how to dial in more. We do this application process, we bring them on, we give information, we talk about having this exchange of ideas, and I think sometimes we're so bogged down in trying to make sure that the information is out there that we don't necessarily get a chance to make it a full communication back and forth and help supply them with things that they can help to spread the project. So looking for influencers in that way. So I think we don't have personally, we want to touch as many people as we can and as many communities as we can. I don't think that we have any other specific communities. I think it just kind of depends on the project and how we approach said communities. So
quick follow-up on that. When you engage like Juxtaposition or some of these other groups, are you compensating them? Are they a sub? They're a subcontract. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. They're our artist cohort, and actually we built into Riverview. We built into the budget that we have an artist cohort, and we have two engagement or two artist leads, and then we had supplied 3 positions and assigned hours to up to 3 positions. We also have an additional, and Ramsey County stepped out on a limb and took on additional funding that's available for our artists to do what they need to do. So if there's somebody that we're missing, it allows us the flexibility to grab onto and tap into, tap into other resources that we may have missed because you're rushing around putting together an RFP, but we want to make sure that we're capturing the right people and compensating them for their time. I think that we talk about that a lot in projects, and we try to do that in any way possible. And this environment has made it a lot harder. I was working on a project in Minneapolis and worked through every kind of hoop possible to try to figure out a way to compensate our focus groups, and it just didn't. We couldn't make it materialize for various reasons. But tried in any possible way because people are taking their time and lending some of their on the street or their expertise or knowledge. I mean, you want to improve your community, but you also time is a value, and we need to recognize that beyond us that are behind the desks doing the work, doing the other work, to I don't want to say interpret, but to and translate's not the right word I'm using either, but translate what the community wants to see.
That's great. No, that was a really important conversation about compensation. So some people had asked that in the chat there. Thanks for that answer. Next question I have is, Tom, you started with that spreadsheet of like an amazing list of digital resources. My gosh, I was really excited to see that. I'm curious for both you and Abdahal, how you chose, well, and Lista too, if you were part of deciding which digital tools to use for the engagement, and then how did you choose which one to use? And then was that part of the research at all to use like 2 different ones and see which one the public liked better, or which one you had some preference or ease of use to?
Well, I'll let Abdul answer the second part of that. In terms of coming up with the original list, there's some advantages of being in a university. You have lots of young people who use lots of digital tools. So we actually started polling our own student body, like, what tools do you use? And then we also did have a really great grad student from the Humphrey School in the early part of this grant who was also really digitally savvy. So she did a lot of the original research on all of these community engagement platforms, where we ended up, I mean, we started with about, a dozen or so, and we ended up with 54. So she really did a great job of uncovering, and that was partly, she surveyed transportation departments. She really, so that's how we came up with the original list, and then we started this evaluation. But I'd be interested in Alyssa and Abdahal's experience in which ones, that you find people are using more, if any of them.
I mean, I can say only recently we've been like entering another phase of community engagement in another project, and that time we started by actually calling some of the organizations and simply like asking them, per your experience of and your these are well-established organizations, people have been working there for years, so how do you think you want us to reach out to the community, and what is your experience about the most effective strategies that you found that was working with them? And I think that was effective because you can spend time trying to anticipate what people want or what they prefer, but I thought that simply asking the question and hearing back from them and accommodating their requests is also very efficient, time saving, and they already will feel heard even before starting the community engagement, but they know that we approach them with the, the way they preferred. We heard that surveys were very popular. That's something that kept coming up when reaching out to organizations with, a large body of people. So as Tom was talking about, we prioritize something that is free to use, accessible to different like age groups and backgrounds, and we spend a lot of time designing the questions as well, so that they are inclusive. They people would it's not problematic, it's as equitable as possible. Some of them are designed so that you get the specific answer you need, and some of them are open so that people have a chance to express themselves or to talk about how they think we can do better, or the survey itself can be developed. So I think while developing the surveys or these questionnaires, we are both looking into the project specific information you need, as well as what we need to do to build that trust and to engage as actively as possible, and to be as flexible as possible, I think.
Yeah, I think I think it's kind of funny and interesting. I think we dropped into pandemic, and again, before the connection was made, we had started kind of doing that research and probably came up with the dozen that you had originally, and we were just at the cusp of like figuring out, okay, well, which ones do we use that are easy, and we were just kind of getting into some of that, and then I think this all kind of came about, and I don't know. I think we're still trying to, I think surveys seem to do it, but always trying to find that unique way of doing it that actually will resonate with someone. And sometimes it's about putting out information. Sometimes it's about like, creating that whole, like your whole circle. You talk, your circle talks about the different aspects. So I think we think about the type of stakeholder or user, or if there's just, and then back to our clients. So we need to find something, we need to have a tool that we can communicate back to our clients. And sometimes our clients kind of dictate what tool we use, to be honest, because that's maybe what they're comfortable with. So we're trying to find ways to, stretch and grow our clients as well as ourselves. So yeah, I think that there are 54 tools out there, and I would love to try them all, or the ones that seem most applicable and easy for both parts of the circle. I guess there's not really parts of a circle, but both ends, so that it makes sense that we're translating information back and forth.
Well, that sounds like another future research project idea, to sort of rate the usability of these different tools. We got another one for you, Tom, there.
I also want to add that we went through the IRB process prior to distributing these surveys. It's not mandatory for like external organizations outside of the university, obviously, to do that, but I think that was also our attempt to try to follow best practices, procedures as much as possible, and honestly to even like motivate that and encourage that in external organizations as well. The research ended up not needing any further approvals, because it doesn't collect specimen or anything, but we had a few recommendations that people would have the option to opt out of the survey at any time they want, that their information is protected and anonymous, and that they know what it's used for, and so on. So I think that was also an important step that we need to pay attention for, especially when reaching out to the youth or vulnerable groups in different engagements.
Well, thanks for that. It was a good conversation about the tools. And I want to apologize, Joe Scala, you've had your hand up for a while and I didn't see that. I'm not that familiar with Zoom, so I didn't notice that. So I don't know if we can unmute you and then you can ask your question yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, Tom, Mary, Lisa, good to see you again. Hopefully someday in the future we'll meet in person. And Epithal, wonderful to meet you today virtually. Just some quick comments. First, I was on the TERP committee that followed this research, and I found it a most enjoyable project to watch getting developed. And also now I'm on the technical advisory committee with Riverview. So watching with great interest how these tools are finally being used with residents, because that was one of the questions my colleagues at Hennepin County said, because I was very excited about the development of the tools, and the response was, well, that's great, but have you gone out and, has the public had the chance to kick the tires yet? So I'm glad to see that the tools are now being used on several projects, and hopefully successful feedback will lead to these tools being used and developed further for many projects in the future. But very quickly, just my personal perspective of participating in public meetings. Two challenges I have found is many people come to these meetings because they have a deep concern that's personal. They're worried that a project's going to have a negative impact on their home, or on their business, or on parking and travel in their neighborhoods. And also when we try to engage, well, we want you to be part of this process early to help us develop ideas and even help determine the route. But some people say, well, show me something. I want to see what you're proposing, so that's what I want to comment on. Have any of these tools helped to break down that, or enable people to feel more confidence that we really want to hear from them, lower the tension level, and expand the collaborative spirit?
Well, I'll start. Joe, thank you. And thank you, by the way, for all of the input that you gave during this whole process. It was terrific to have you on the TERP review committee. One reason we developed those 3D visualization tools, which can be done real time, is it allows people to sort of see, okay, here's an area. What happens if I do this, or if I put this here and I move it, or you can move it around it. And so, we one of the aha things we found was a lot of people don't read maps very well. I mean, just understandably. I mean, so that's why we went to Street View and Google, or, developing these 3D visualizations. People start to understand, oh, that's what that would look like. And so we do think the more immersive the tool and the more real time it can be manipulated, as people make suggestions, the better. But Lisa or Ebtehal, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
I agree. I think that we've practiced it more in building projects, than in a transportation project. But I can see that happening. I know we've done it. Mostly, I would say the closest connection would be with Metro Transit. We've done that for several Metro Transit projects that kind of walk you around the space. But I think that that's definitely being able to do that and do it in a nimble way is something that it helps people.
Great, thanks for that. Any other comments about Joe's question? No? Good. All right, well, another one that I think relates to something that came up in the chat and something that you all have been talking about is do you have any sense for the demographics you've been able to reach in some of these new ways? I don't know if your clients have given you targets to say, well, we'd want to meet, have certain percents of different populations, or if they've talked about like, oh, boy, this is better than the last time we did this when we had just standard public meetings and whatnot. So do you have a sense for how you've been able to engage with populations that typically haven't been involved in the past?
Go ahead, Ebtehal.
I was just gonna say for surveys and public meetings, we started either sending a short demographic survey before or after the event to keep track of that. And for like communities that are underrepresented, or I was having interviews with Lisa and Nathan about that, and I think the strategy about this is to show up in person wherever they actually are. I mean, that way they will feel more heard, they will feel prioritized, and then we can engage better. I don't know, yeah, if Lisa has something to add.
I was going to say, if we can facilitate conversations, again, I'll throw the buzzword influencers out. So if there's somebody from the community that we can support, again, talking about compensation, if there's somebody that in the community that we can support that can help get the message out, then that becomes a win-win, I think, in that way. I don't think that we've encountered that it's reaching underrepresented populations and expanding our reach is always a goal. Whether it's written down in an RFP or not, that it's something that we always want to do. And and some communities are harder to reach, and still trying to figure that out, I think is kind of what keeps me going. But I think really trying to find the right, like I said, the right avenue. It could be, it could be any number of ways to do it, through an organization or just finding that right person, on the street. But being able to find someone that's well connected and create that influence there. So if we can bring up, I think, bring up the language and the understanding and the knowledge, then that would be great. Some of the documents and some of the documentation is it's too heavy, and it's and Google Translate's not going to do it right. But and there's this term that I keep forgetting that I love, and it's not translate, but it's like trans, and I'm going to forget it again, but like because it's not necessarily word for word, a direct correlation between, urban planning and, whatever it might mean in another language. So I think having those definitions and then being able to present that to somebody that can provide that influence, then they can turn around and say, okay, now I understand this because I do speak English, but I also speak this other language, and I can now take this and put it in a term that I think someone will understand. That from my community that doesn't necessarily speak English as their first or second language.
Great, thank you. All right, I think we got last question. It's up in the Q&A. So this is about apathy. I mean, do you see people apathetic about engaging on transportation projects? And do some of these tools or unique ways of reaching out, are they helping with any of that apathy?
Well, again, I was just typing a response to that. I mean, again, one of our goals, as I said earlier, with these tools was to really engage communities much earlier. I think some of this apathy comes from the fact that people sort of feel like the decisions are already made, that, the transportation planners are just kind of checking off a box, that their the project's too far along, that their ideas really won't matter. So I think we have to flip the model. And that was our goal with all of this. But Lisa and Iptihal, what are your thoughts?
I think, yeah, as you were saying, like we in one of the projects, we would go back after engaging with the people and have a one-on-one meeting with the community leader and ask them such questions. And a comment we got a couple of times is that they had like negative previous experiences where they expressed themselves, and then the final outcome came and they didn't think that they were heard, or they had any power on actually changing the outcome. But as you were saying, these tools are meant to capture like the whole process of engagement, from starting from informing them, hopefully up until like collaborating with them, engaging with them, and empowering the community and being empowered by their feedback to have a better project. So I think like we have we try to have this as the core of our decisions. Like, is this decision moving the tool from one phase to another? Is it actually engaging them more effectively? And are we able to go back and report that change somehow? Sometimes that's easy because we have like an open house next week and we go and tell them what we did with these comments. Sometimes it's more challenging where it has to be a two-way street. Like in the input ID, people who add comments have the chance to include their email or contact information so that any response to their comment can go directly to their email and they would know what the consultant did with that comment, or where it's going, where they can find an answer. But if they didn't provide an email, it's sort of it requires more effort for them to come back and check any updates until the next engagement event. So yeah, I'm learning that in some cases it's a two-way street as well.
I was going to, and now I'm just going to veer off script from the question, but thanks to Hyla, she reminded me the term is transcreate, and we learned that from NICA Creative, and it's a way to, like I said, take this set of information and make it and so that it's adapted to to something that's relevant and can is approachable. And I read a comment about door knocking, and I think that can work in some ways. I also think that there are just some populations and some people that don't want to answer their door. So I think that we've got to hit multimedia strategies. And I think if we're able to find ways, again, I think Tom talked a lot about smartphones and cell phones, and if we can find a way to get people there, then maybe we can at least start to garner the interest, and then follow that up with some of the other tools to kind of bring a full circle and loop to understanding a project and getting feedback and continuing that on. So I don't know, I probably just threw the whole question off, but.
No, that's great. I really appreciate I was just going to say, oh, we've got one more. I know we were going to stop, but thanks for answering the door knocking questions. It could be one of the tools in the toolbox at the right stage. And I'm so glad you found the term you were looking for. It was going to bug me too, because I knew it would be really cool. What a great term, transcreate. It's kind of translate, transcreate. I like that. All right, with that.
From NACA. I'm giving credit to NACA Creative.
That's great.
Who was working with us on Riverview, so.
Cool. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it to Mary. Let's do our round robin.
All right, so this is our opportunity for all of our attendees to let us know if you have updates that you want to share with us. Again, we are the Planning and Economy Research Council, so think about updates that you can share with us that can really get us thinking about what are the research needs. So again, building off of what we were just talking about, one of the comments that folks have shared is, we know that as we implement these tools, one of the unintended effects is that it's dividing our nation. So do people have thoughts about how we can develop new measures of effectiveness to look at not only the number of people that we're engaging, but the effectiveness of that engagement in building community and bridging community? Anybody have thoughts on that? Or know of research that is being done to help us address that question? Okay, a resounding no means Tom. Lisa, we've got a research question. All right. I see Joe Scala. Joe, do you have your hand up?
I was thinking of an individual story concerning overcoming divisiveness and partisanship. And it was a story about a graduate student. I think she was at University of Wisconsin. I may not have that right, but basically she embedded herself in a rural neighborhood, rural community to do some research. And at first there was that feeling, here's this intellectually oriented young person from the city, and what do you know about me living out in the country and all of my issues? But as they got to know each other person to person, they developed a very good and respectful rapport. And I think part of our polarization problem is that we come in already so entrenched in our position, but also entrenched in the position that your position is totally wrong versus, hey, let's just take all this tension and somehow push it to the side. Let me get to know you as a person. No matter how different we are, I'm sure we're going to start to find common ground if we just, for lack of a better word, relax and start to talk to each other as individuals.
Great. Thank you, Joe, for sharing that. All right, next, I see Glenn has his hand up. Beth, can you unmute Glenn?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So we call that durable coalition building. And you already have a great example of that in Rondo, in Reconnect Rondo, where the community came in understanding what they wanted and needed, and they pushed their interests onto the table with maybe some receptiveness and some resistance, but that has now become a conversation that's broader than any one interest. It's no longer about how do we widen the highway or how do we do maintenance and operation in the highway. It is now about the community around it and how do we get more out of that project than just this one thing. And that's actually how you build durable coalitions. You met the various interests in that area, start to identify why they would want to belong to that project. Mm-hmm. And you work together to build as much agreement as you can on outcomes that the partners would want. That then is the way you keep a coalition durable over the long haul, because transportation and infrastructure is a long haul.
Thank you, Glenn. So if I'm repeating back what I heard, a measure of effectiveness that you are suggesting is the cohesiveness of the coalition or the cohesiveness of the community. Is that a fair assessment?
Sort of. So I'm suggesting projects can be specifically designed to build durable coalitions. And a result that you should be measuring for is, number one, are you trying to? And number two, then what's successful in that process?
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Glenn, do you have anything else that you research questions that are on your mind that you would like to pose to the group?
So the only other one's accessibility. You define that in a card, and that's actually really hard. It is not just about ADA compliance. It is about the built environment. Are we moving things closer to people so they can get to the grocery walking safely, et cetera? That's a lot of different things. And I would suggest that well, actually we're working on that. I would suggest you work on really what's that engagement around accessibility to really understand it for your projects.
Great, I love it, thank you. How about from some of our friends from Olmsted County, whether that be Brian Carlson or Ben Griffith, any research questions that are on your minds that you would like the Planning and Economy Council thinking about? And Beth, if you could unmute either Brian or Ben.
Hi, good morning. It's Brian Carlson. Hey, I appreciate the comments that we've shared this morning. I think they're absolutely fascinating to see how we take this capability of engaging with our communities, whether they are in the metro area or rural area, and make sure that we can understand what is important to them. One of the things I think that is helpful for us is while we recognize that we've got perhaps easier access, if you will, to a lot of communities within the metro area, the rural state of Minnesota also has significant economic diversity and vitality issues that we have to make sure that we address. And transportation and our ability to be able to use transportation is a key component. So one of the research areas that we are hoping we can be looking at over the coming years is how do we keep some of our rural communities vibrant and engaged and be great places for a lot of folks to live, raise children, and perform their professional lives at the same time as living in communities that are perhaps not in the metro area. Difficult questions, we understand, but it's something that those of us in Olmsted County and other communities outside of the metro area are hoping that we can address.
Thank you, Brian. Great question. Let's see. I don't see any more hands up for round robin. So I'm just going to give you one more minute to think about any updates that you would like to share with us about what planning or economy issues you or your organization are facing, any research questions that you want us to start partnering with you to formulate so that we can get these tools that we need to better engage with our communities and build the communities that we all want to live in. Lisa, I'm not seeing any additional hands go up. Panelists, anything else that you would like us to be thinking about?
Oh, I saw one more hand. Galen, Ryan.
Okay. I think you can unmute Galen.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, good morning. Yeah, I appreciate the discussion so far. And I do have an additional comment to share. I need to formulate it here. So I am working on a research study right now with Lisa Austin to conduct a qualitative interview study across the state to engage underserved communities with a lens of centering the margins in improving transportation equity. As Abdal has mentioned, the university needs to go through this IRB process that, they have their own requirements, and the university needs to follow that as you engage human participants to protect their interests. And that process gets complicated as you look to involve community in the process, because it's really just tailored for maybe deductive thinking to just have the researchers decide and then go forward. And so I'm wondering about, similar to the thinking about toolkits, is there a toolkit that can be developed for researchers as they work with their IRB committees on engaging, qualitative research around transportation issues? And I hope that all made sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Galen. So if it's okay with Glenn and with Brian and Galen, what I'm going to do is take a shot at summarizing what I heard, and I will reach out to each one of you to see if we got it right. And if you can just help us make sure that we have caught those thoughts and then can share it with CTS and with our researchers, that will be a great help in advancing our council and making sure our council is relevant to the work that we are all doing today. So with that, again, I want to thank our speakers. Abdul, Lissa, Tom, this was a fantastic presentation today, a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing and that you shared with us today. Please let us know if our council can be a partner with you, and again, moving forward and continuing into the future. We would love to be a sounding board for you, and also just really cheerleaders supporting the important work that you are doing in each of our communities. With that, thank you to all of our participants for being here today. It was great to have each of you on. Thank you for participating in the question and answer. Lovely conversation today. And also thank you for participating in the round robin. Lisa, anything else you would like to say, or CTS, anything you would like to say before we close today's webinar?
No, I'm just thrilled. This was a great presentation and great interactive questions and round robin with the best ever. So really good to see a engaged group here. So yeah, with that, Beth, I don't know if you've got anything else.
No? All right. Again, thank you, everybody. Do be in touch. Let us know. And again, if you do need or want AICP credit or certification of continuing education units, do feel free to drop your information in the chat. And we'll leave that open just for a minute longer here. And thank you again for being here. And we look forward to seeing you in the spring.
Mary, are you still on?
I am still on, Beth.
Yep,
Do you
so
need
am I
me
too.
to collect those names for AICP? Are you going to do that?
If you're able to, that would be a huge help. Yeah, I don't know if you can download the chat or not.
I know, I was
Probably.
thinking the same thing. The chat, there's some nice conversation here. I don't know if you saw that other one from Glenn about talking about the depth probe as a quality survey process. So yeah, I'd be interested to have the chat just to make sure that we don't lose any of the comments that were in there. Is that something you know how to do, Beth, or do you
Yeah,
have,
I think
can
as
try
the
to-
yeah, I think as the host, it'll automatically download for me.
Okay, cool.
I can send that to should I just send it to you, or who all should I send it?
I don't know, Mary and I, the two of us. I don't know if anyone else needs to see the chat.
And
Okay.
I think for the AICP credits, Beth, give that to Katie. And I think Katie, as long as she'll be back, and then Katie works with each participant to get the credits that they need.
Yep. We don't know how to do that.
Either I'm filling in, so I'm glad you guys know at least a little something about what to do. There's just 2 names, so I jotted those down. So I'll pass it on to Katie, and then I will email you to the chat when I get it. And if you need anything else, you can just let me know.
And there was a third one in she put it in the Q&A. Trina Williams wanted AICP.
It looks to me like there's quite a few AICP people. There came in at the very beginning.
Oh, and I wouldn't be able to see that because I didn't get here till almost 10. So
right. All right. Let's
do you
see
have other
if I can.
names?
Yes. So let's go through that. So Alicia Valenti here, I can put it back in the chat for you. Let's do
That'd be great, just for spellings and stuff. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, and if you're only, I wonder if you'll get the whole chat then. If you're.
No, I may only get. Yeah, I've never done a webinar like this, and I've never come back. So it's going to be kind of an experiment.
Yeah, well,
I'll certainly send you what I have. So
yep, and I just cut and pasted it into a Word document, so it may not format really nice. So yeah, why don't you send us what you got? But at least I've got that as a backup. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
So do you have all the names, Lisa? So then I won't.
Yeah. Yep. It's not formatted all nice where it's just text, right? So it doesn't. There's a little from and then the lines, but yeah, you'll see it. I'll send that to all of us so that.
Okay, so do you want me to? Because I think I just get it as like a TXT file. Do you want me to send that?
Okay. No, that's right. I've got it, so I'll send it to
yeah,
both.
if you can send it to me, then I will take out any of the AICP folks and make sure Katie gets that data.
Cool.
Okay.
Okay, awesome.
Right.
Thanks for being flexible with our rotating.
Oh, yeah, I just hope Katie's okay. I hope it's
Yeah.
not too serious with Katie. I mean, it's personal stuff she'll share if she wants to, but that's alarming to hear that she has some medical things. So hopefully she's okay,
Yeah,
and tell us that we're thinking.
Yeah, I don't know that much about it either, but hopefully she'll be just fine, but just bad timing in terms of having to staff this and then trying to juggle our schedules this morning. So
Yeah. Well, tell her we're thinking about her, and that all her prep work made it go off without a hitch. So
right. Yeah, it
no
seems like
big
it was
deal.
an awesome event from the part that I came to. So yeah, if you can shoot me that chat, I will get the information from that. And I think otherwise we're all set.
Awesome.
Okay, Lisa, I don't know if I got what was his question at the end? You had
yeah, it's in the whole chat thing because I just cut and pasted the whole chat. So you'll see it. I'll send it to you. And if yeah, he says, Lisa, can I talk to you all about in-depth probe, which sounds like it must be as a qualitative survey process, and my side gig to develop in their voices database.
Okay. And then also Galen's question, I was focused on facilitating and not on listening to the questions, the research questions. So yeah.
Yeah, he said something about a toolkit for researchers to get by the IRB process, but what is IRB? I'm assuming that must be like private data privacy.
IRB is Institutional Research Board. So it has to do with dealing with human subjects, so that if you have human subjects in your research, you have to get IRB approval to make sure that you're handling them correctly. Okay,
and I would guess that they're no more stringent than the public sector agencies would need for data privacy stuff, right? I mean, I would assume it's similar. You want to make sure people's information's private. Yeah, we can follow up.
I think it's a lot more in depth, Lisa, because it can include medical research. So I think it's more in depth in that way. But I'm not familiar either, so we can follow up with him. To get that one. And then let's see, we had Glenn, and we've got his contact information, I'm sure, from the registration. And then we had Brian Carlson.
And I'll see if I was taking some notes, so I'll see if I see any other research ideas. That was good. I think that's the first time we've had people actually talk about research ideas, which is really good. After a while of continually reminding them each time, like they've gotten into their head that no, this is the round robin, is to talk about research. So that's good.
Exactly. All right, very good. Go team. Well done today, everybody.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks all. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.